First of all, welcome to the channel and thank you for stopping by. When time permits, please consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. Today I want to take a couple minutes of your time and talk about what is absolutely the best money I have ever spent on this bike. The KTM 390 Adventure ships with a relatively good spring for an adult, which is surprising. That's very uncommon. People buy Africa Twins, they pay upwards of $20,000 for them, and they sit on it with our American sizes and crunch that thing right down. But the 390 Adventure ships with a relatively okay spring. I believe if you are under 200 pounds, it'll be perfect for the road with plenty of adjustability and more than likely okay off-road. When I started riding this bike, I was 190 pounds and I took it off-road, and I was surprised that it didn't just bottom out constantly the way my Honda did when I bought it, the way Africa Twins have ridden. I mean, even there's a couple of KTMs I've ridden that a little squishier than you'd like. But this bike didn't generally bottom out unless I was doing some form of drop-off. You know, every now and again you'll go over a rock and you're going to fall 12 inches. That would absolutely bottom it out. But I wouldn't consider that normal behavior for an adventure bike. Under 12 inches, it would handle it quite well. Now, I should have prefaced that with, I'm talking about the rear suspension. Now, the front suspension is an entirely different story. On the road, I found it to be quite manageable and good. I mean, this bike is actually an adventured up 390 street bike. We all know that, we accept it, it's fine. And the springs they put in the front were great for the street. They were stiff enough for it, they gave in the turns where you wanted it to, great. So when you took that spring that was, in my opinion, designed for the road, and you started banging it into things, it invariably bottomed out. Every single ride, it would bottom out. All right, let's take a look here at the forks. You're going to see these red rings, and what these rings are for is to tell us exactly how far down we have compressed our suspension. I replaced the stock springs with Hyperpro progressive springs. Now, prior to doing that, my red rings were always at the bottom. I'd clean my forks, move them back up, and as soon as I went off road, they'd be right back to the bottom. At 190 to 195 pounds, those springs simply could not stop the bike from bottoming out with almost any kind of terrain. I replaced them with the Hyperpro progressives, and these have been, for me, at I think I'm 197 pounds right now after the winter, perfect. Absolutely perfect. This year, at my highest weight in quite a while, I did the Smoky Mountain 500. And the Smoky Mountain 500 is a lot of rocky terrain, a lot of drops, a lot of mud holes, a lot of compression of the front suspension. When I was done, those red rings were 2 inches above the bottom. I never bottomed it out. And I'm not going to ride anything really rougher than that on a regular basis. So, as I said earlier, money well spent. I would absolutely recommend anyone who is not 150 pounds to take a look at your rings, determine how far you're compressing your suspension, and it's probably more than you think, and go take a look at the Hyperpro progressive springs. And this, unlike the rear, is an incredibly inexpensive upgrade. Around $200, it will transform the front of this bike, and I honestly believe prevent you from damaging your bike. Okay, here with the rear. As I said earlier, I believe this bike ships with a spring, with a shock that is perfectly acceptable for a 200-pound person. Now, when I would go off-road, I would occasionally bottom it out, but never more than once or twice. And honestly, if I had picked a better line, you could ride this off-road without bottoming it out. That said, I was looking at going off-road carrying 60 pounds of camping gear. In addition to that, my 20-ish pound set of racks that I put on the bike. While I wasn't bottoming out riding, when it came time to make this my camping bike, I knew that I was going to have to do something, because good enough for 200 wasn't going to help me when I increased the weight of the bike. So I went ahead and started looking for springs. At this point in time, I had not seen an actual replacement shock for the bike. And I was about to order a spring. I think it was $99. Not a bad price at all. And then I saw ADV Matt had done, as I had, the front springs on his bike. And he mentioned in that video that they have, or maybe are going to soon have, a rear shock with more adjustability and an external reservoir. So I said to myself, why spend $99 when I can probably spend $1,000? So let's look for one of those. As luck would have it, $1,000 was not enough at the time. I'm not going to say what I paid for it. Let's just say it was painfully more. The good news is the shock I'm using today, which is set for my weight, including my camping gear, which gives me a bit of a stiff ride without the camping gear, but so be it. That can now be had for $9.99 from a couple of different places on the internet. So while I consider it money well spent and I don't regret it at all, it's an even better deal for people shopping today. $1,000 for a quality made shock, and Hyperpro is a good company with an excellent track record in their products. $1,000 for that rear shock is fantastic. Now, you may have noticed I have not said that I've never bottomed out the back, like I don't the front anymore. And if I'd done this review 1 month ago, I would have told you I have never bottomed out this Hyperpro shock. However, that changed on the Smoky Mountain 500. I was in a group ride, I was riding to keep up, and I did not choose my line well, and I went off of an embedded rock. And immediately after the embedded rock was about a 1.5 foot drop to hit the ground. And oh, did I bottom that shock out. I bottomed the bike out. I can't believe I didn't bottom the front out, but I guess I did land on the rear wheel. And that is the only time I have managed to bottom out this properly weighted shock. And again, that's one of the nice things about Hyperpro. You put in your weight, how you're going to use it, and the weight of the luggage you expect it to hold, and they give you the appropriate shock for that, or the appropriate spring and shock for that, which is fantastic. It comes preset from them. The box has exactly what the settings are so that you can tinker with it as you want to. And as it turned out, I ended up doing quite a bit of tinkering to this. So they were good. They were very good, but they weren't quite ready for the amount of bumps I go through. So I did have to make changes to the rebound so that it would rebound a little bit faster as I go through the type of terrain where I live. But I do think that they're a great starting point. That's a nice service. In addition to configuring the shock properly for you, it does come with one included rebuild. So I can take this, I believe it's 2 or 3 years, and I will pull it out of the bike, I'll put my other shock in it, send it to them, and they'll rebuild it. It'll be good as new, which means for your $1,000, you're going to not have to worry about paying for a rebuild realistically for 4 or 5 years, which is pretty darn good. When I mentioned $1,000 wouldn't touch the shock for my FC1, there was no rebuild included in that, and the rebuild price was $495. So I do believe there's a lot of value with that included rebuild. If you feel you might need it, I do believe Hyperpro is a fantastic product, and I don't regret, again, spending over $1,000. Now the front, I believe if you are an average sized American male, I think that's 175 pounds, absolutely positively I recommend you just go ahead and order a set of progressive springs. Not only will the progressive spring cancel, not only will the progressive springs feel better as a rule in braking and handling, but they will not bottom out on you unless you are going absolutely hardcore off-road. And I would say if you were bottoming out those when I haven't on an 18-inch drop, you're probably going to break something else on this bike. So you may want to buy a different bike or adjust your riding style. All right. If you stuck around, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and take care.